Hello everyone and welcome to Game 3 between Dimaga and Hasu here on Shakura's Plateau. This is Game 3 and so far the games have been pretty interesting. They pretty much just catapult straight into the late game. No really early engagements. We'll see if that does change here on Shakura's Plateau. Shakura's Plateau, and one of those maps everyone's very familiar with. Originally a 2v2 map with backdoor rocks that turned out to be imbalanced, but then as soon as it became a 1v1 map forcing cross spawns, everyone really liked it, and a real favorite of a map for a lot of players. The natural expansion is protected by high ground here, so it is very easy to defend and get into a very strong macro style of play. Meanwhile, Dimaga is not doing anything too crazy or out of the ordinary, currently just training up drones. Currently just training up drones, sending off some overlords to do a little bit of scouting, and we'll see what's going to happen of this as the probe's simply going to come up the ramp, take a look around, and see when exactly Dimaga will be placing down his spawning pool, extractor, or his hatchery. The probe just still wandering in between all of these locations here, and really much trying to figure out the pace that these players will be playing. It is going to be an earlier spawning pool, so I believe that Hasu will most likely be going for an earlier forge, perhaps. He could still go for that nexus, but it's a little bit riskier when you know that your opponent is going for that spawning pool early. With that spawning pool early, perhaps you can get 5 to 6 Zerglings to run by and get some damage inside onto these probes, and as soon as some damage, and as soon as you have to focus and micro your probes to make sure that they don't get taken down, you end up losing a lot. It looks like a drone is going to come down and grow up to be a hatchery though, so it doesn't look like Dimaga is in any serious threat of really being able to flood in a lot of units. Forge is coming into play. It looks like Hasu will be slowing down his probe production for a little bit of time. Gonna be warping in an additional gateway as Zerglings are now being trained, but those Zerglings will not be able to get there anytime soon. So Hasu pretty much in a pretty decent situation. Taking a look at the harvester count, 18 probes versus 16 drones. We are going to be training up a queen and more Zerglings as well. It looks like a photon cannon will be added as the Zerglings are now starting to make their way out, and Dimaga looking to establish a third base. That may be a problem though, as there is going to be a probe to keep track of this. This drone going to grow up to be a third base, so Zergling now going to try to make sure to check up onto that high ground and simply walking all the way around, and he may not spot that probe. The probe just hiding off in the center there, and that is going to be huge. Hasu hiding in plain sight from this Zergling. And that is rather funny. You're going to see the Zergling now being able to make its way on the inside. He's not going to be able to get that much damage in, as the probes are able to just shoo it away. And there is one Zergling sitting there. This hatchery by Dimaga being built around the 4-minute mark. So it's doing a double expand this early in the game. Normally Zerg players do want to be up on bases, but we'll see how Hasu's going to respond. Hasu most likely will get that cybernetics core here. He is not finishing off the wall off, so Zerglings will still be able to run by. A rather curious position, as Zerglings, if they're able to run by, will be able to deal a lot of damage. Perhaps he wants to get another photon cannon. Yeah, double photon cannons to limit the amount of damage that those Zerglings can do. And the Zerglings still running around trying to find this one probe. Rather cute, rather funny that there's just this one dark center in the map, and now the probe is going to be able to hide off over here and now start getting some photon cannons. So Dimaga pretty much in trouble. Hasu knows that there is a hatchery off over here, an overlord now coming in, and oh, is the Zergling going to spot it? The Zergling does spot the photon cannon, but now going to try to come back up. Is it going to come up in time, getting some damage? Are we going to get those cannons in play? It looks like, yes, a cannon is going to be added, and now this probe is going to try to run around, perhaps warp in another cannon, and now getting in another pylon as well. So this one photon cannon is going to be able to complete. It is not going to get flanked at all. More Zerglings need to make their way up that ramp. Double photon cannons. Is it going to be enough? Is this... Oh, that pylon is... Oh, they all got canceled at just the last moment there, as Hasu realized that he could not really afford to do that. Perhaps if he built the first pylon here instead, the Zergling would not have caught sight, and that photon cannon rush would have been successful. Now, Hasu is currently sitting at 36 over 36. He is not in a good situation, losing a lot of pylons. And now, even after warping in the additional pylon, he is still behind on food by a large amount. 42 probes versus 34, 42 drones versus 34 probes, excuse me. As more and more drones are still being added. A Stalker needs to perhaps sit off in that position to prevent the Zerglings from being able to run by. This is not going to be good. The Stalker getting the memo at just the right moment, able to sit there and defend against this Zergling swarm. Now, making sure to keep an Overlord up on the high ground, wanting to know that there are not going to be any photon cannon antics here on this hatchery, as Dimaga now is very comfortably sitting off of 3 bases. 51 drones, or 54 drones versus 41 probes, and I'm really surprised that Hasu hasn't gone into a Stargate. Stargate normally works out very well if your opponent is trying to go into into a massive 3 base. If you get some early Zealots and those Stargates, those Void Rays can really add in a lot of damage, and also the Zealots can challenge and take on the Queens, which is very important, as those Zealots deal a very, very large amount into those Queens, especially if the Queens are trying to focus down the Void Ray. And the Queens just are the really true only anti-air early on. You can see now that Roaches are being added in, as well as now Sentries and Stalkers are now making a little bit of a push. So Hasu looks as though he is going to be committed to this 2-base play. His army is still smaller in terms of total resources, and that is definitely not good. More Stalkers are now being added. We are going into the ground armor upgrades. Not quite. We already have the level 1 weapons upgrade as well, so the Sentries, Stalkers, and Zealots will be a little bit stronger in that capacity, but is it going to be enough? Dimaga, with still a commanding 20 or 30 food advantage, may be able to just sit back and defend very well, and as soon as he defends, he should be able to fight off and perhaps pull off the victory. The longer the game goes, the better this game will be for Dimaga. Hasu needs to make something happen, and he needs to make it happen fast. Otherwise, economically speaking, he will end up falling. Wait a second, what the heck? 57 probes? Okay, I'm not quite sure how that happened, but all of a sudden, Hasu now has more probes than his opponent. I may have been keeping tabs incorrectly or getting those swapped between the colors. But yeah, 59 probes versus 58 drones. So creep tumors are now being canceled. The economy of Hasu is looking very strong, and I really don't know what to make of this. Photon cannons now on the low ground. It looks like Hasu is going to start to slowly expand into his opponent. Production tab, we are getting more Immortals, and now finally going into the robotics bay. Hasu about to get the level 1 armor upgrades, clearing off even more creep tumors as well. And by constantly stopping this creep tumor spread, there is not going to be that all-important creep highway as I mentioned earlier, or mentioned in the previous game. Pathogen glands now being started. We'll see if Dimaga is a little bit more successful with infestors this time around, as we are now getting even more gateway units and more photon cannons here. So Hasu looking to really start expanding and perhaps surpass his opponent, but now sitting at 106 compared to 146. This game is absolutely confusing me. 64 probes versus 64 drones now. More than half of Hasu's food is currently on these probes, as is a Queen now pushing in and now trying to lay down a creep tumor. A Zealot now coming in, and also a Changeling, which quickly gets killed, as that Changeling would not be able to really keep track or scout anything at all. Now, taking a look back over here, gateways have been completed, and really the production somehow, even though they're at the same harvesting numbers, it's really a 50 food advantage. And now in come the Roaches. Roaches are now trying to flank in. Infestors to get off a fungal growth. Roaches are going to continue that push even further. And now all of those Stalkers have been destroyed. Army compositions, we can see that Dimaga is slightly or really far ahead in terms of total mineral, as the Zerglings are now going to try to push their way in and perhaps go for a flank. The Sentries and the Stalkers, gateways have been placed down here, so we may have a bit of an engagement, but this is not going to be a good fight, as Roaches, Colossi, massive number of force fields, massive number of infested Terrans being added, but the Colossus should be able to handle those infested Terrans rather easily, as splash damage really making their, or just pushing their way through. Infested Terrans could be spawned up onto the high ground here in just a moment. The roaches do have sight, but blocked by pylons. So the pylons blocking roaches from being able to spawn any infested Terrans. And rather curious play as the roaches are now swarming in through the center. So the roach infestation in the main base here. Force field's now trying to come in. The infestors are backing off. Once again, Zerglings perhaps trying to come in a little bit further as a cybernetics core has been taken down. The roaches dealing a lot of damage, and now infestors coming in from the back. More fungal growth still to be had as the roaches are battling it out. One immortal, though, going to cause a little bit of problems, and it looks like another infestor has been destroyed. Roaches still chasing back this army, and Dimaga with a rather larger army not allowing Hasu to macro up, going to be able to destroy all of Hasu's armies here, but there is still a decent number of photon cannons. Infested Terrans now being spawned straight into the mineral line here, and now all of these probes will simply fall, and Hasu says GG. So a rather confusing game from a casting perspective. It looked like Hasu at one point realized that he was behind economically, decided to get a lot of probes, decided to try to extend the game longer by getting up a strong economy, and because he trained so many probes, he wasn't able to train up a large enough army, and the timing on Dimaga's attack was absolutely perfect. It was clutch and able to come in and simply just outflank Hasu and force Hasu to say GG. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed this game here on Shakura's Plateau.